dollars into more policing and more arrests and bigger jails. And there's another convention that says, no, we need diversionary programs and we need treatment programs and we need to find constructive ways to divert those that, with help, can find a path clear of drugs and violence and a criminal life. How do you come down on this issue?
Well, it's a balance. I mean, to me, it's very clear that Oakland needs more police. If you look at other cities and comparable populations, I mean, I happen to just, because of an article I read, looked on the internet at Baltimore. Baltimore is less than twice as large as Oakland. It's was like 780,000. Oakland is slotted for, I believe, about 820 sworn officers, and now it's 740 or however many they have on it.
Right.
Yeah. Baltimore has 3,000 sworn officers, and you know the Oakland police have a tremendously difficult job. You know, everybody's asking for, you know, walking beat patrolmen, everybody's asking for more community policing, everybody's asking for these additional police strategies where they're basically trying to cover the beats and trying to respond to the calls and take care of the emergency situations, which makes it very difficult for them to be proactive in a lot of areas, which does prevent crime.
Right.
So I think there's definitely a need for increased police presence.
Sure, sure.
There are a number of prevention, rehabilitation programs throughout the county. I mean, there's Prop 36 where the drug possessors go into programs.
Is that for first-time offenders, or?
It's much more complicated than that. It was passed by an initiative based on nonviolent first-time offenders.
Okay.
But that's really not accurate.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of teeth in it. It probably is not as effective as the old drug court system that we used before.
Tell us about that, the old drug court system.
Well, the drug court system, basically someone that committed a drug possession offense and that didn't have a real violent background would go into drug court. They would probably plead guilty, be put on probation. They would come back to the court for regular progress reports, and they would be tested to see if they tested dirty. You know, they'd be reviewed if they got rearrested or what happened. And the judge in those cases had discretion. If they violated the term of probation, he could give them what's sort of referred to as shock incarceration. He could give them 10 days, and you know, if they had a dirty test, he could take them off the street, give them 10 days to dry them up again, get them started again. Under his Prop 36, there needs to be 3 violations before the judge has any ability to use flash incarceration.
Wow.
So it doesn't have the teeth in it. And a lot of these people, I mean, they have serious problems. These addictions are something that none of us really understand, but they're very difficult to deal with. And if you tell someone they have 3 chances, they're going to use 3 chances.
Sure, sure.
You know, we also have a mentor diversion program, which we take some of the young individuals that maybe have a very small drug sale that aren't normally available for diversion.
Right.
Hook them up with a mentor. If they reach certain goals, that case can end up being dismissed.
It's funny, it seems to always go back to consequences. Growing up, there was always a consequence for doing something that was wrong, and it sounds, what you're explaining is they've taken some of those consequences away.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm not saying that having the consequences is going to solve everything.
Sure,
because nothing's going to solve everything.
Right, right.
But it's another tool that could be, I think, more useful than it is.
So, you know, the volume that you have, how many cases between the property crime and the violent crime are you managing right now that you have in the system?
What I looked up before I came here was how many felonies we charged in Oakland in the last 12 months.
Okay, just in the last 12 months?
Yeah, the last 12 months. And it was a little over 3,600, 3,600 felonies charged in Oakland. In the system now, I don't have an exact number for you, but countywide, including misdemeanors, it's got to be, I would say, probably between 7,000 and 10,000.
How many courts are there available then to hear those cases?
I'd have to add them up there. At the Oakland Wiley Manuel Courthouse, which is what we used to call municipal court, which handles misdemeanors and the preliminary hearings in felony cases, there are supposed to be now 10 judges assigned. Right now it's down a little bit. I think there's 8 or 9, and they're trying to get assigned judges in to fill in. There are a couple of vacancies in the county. But the problem with that is that 5 of those are what we call calendar courts. And those are courts that do arraignments, do plea bargaining, do law and motion stuff. They don't really do preliminary hearings or trials. So that leaves you theoretically 5 to do all the preliminary hearings and all the misdemeanor trials in the city of Oakland.
Right.
Actually, there's a little bit more comes in from Berkeley.
So it sounds there's a little bottleneck there.
Yeah, and if you have, you're supposed to have 5, you rarely have 5. Just with vacations and everything else, you're going to be down 1 or 2 most of the time. And if you're short there, you can be down to 2 because the calendar courts have to be staffed. So if a calendar court judge is off, one of the other judges goes into that calendar court. Right. So sometimes you have 2 or 3 judges really available to do all the jury trials.
Wow. And
all the preliminary hearings in the city of Oakland. And when I say the city of Oakland, I'm cheating a little bit because cases come in from Berkeley and Albany and Emeryville and Piedmont. But probably 90% of those cases are Oakland cases.
Sure, sure. And looking at the volume then, and again, in preparation for our discussion today, I was doing some reading, and there are various opinions out there. One opinion was that it was difficult for the DA's office to find the talented young folks with experience to work in the courts. You've dispelled some of that this morning. And then another theory was that basically there's been a drop-off in the number of cases. And there's 2 arguments. And one of the arguments is that it's gotten more complex, and that the rights of those being accused are being more fully and vigorously defended. Would you find that as a true statement, as a trend?
I would say cases are getting more complex, but let me take the first part. As far as the number of cases going in the system decreasing, I don't really think that's correct. If it's down somewhat, it's due to the fact that arrests are down somewhat, because what happens on a criminal case is the police bring us their investigation. The police reports, statements, review what the physical evidence is, whatever. We review that case to see whether or not there's enough evidence for us to go to court with it.
Right.
And of the cases the police bring us, we charge, that is, actually bring to court about 80%. And about 20% we look at it, we just don't have enough evidence there.
Right.
That doesn't mean the arrest was bad or anything, but
sure.
Just as it develops. And that 80% has pretty much been constant over the years. So as far as, at least in felonies, those cases that are brought to us, we charge about 80%. And if the case numbers are down a little bit, it's because there are less arrests.
You know, looking at crime trends in Oakland from 2002 to 2006 end year, and then looking at the beginning of the year, Oakland has a significant reduced arrest rate as a ratio to the actual number of crimes, significantly below the state average. And then, of course, in the crime, we're significantly above the state average. And then from 2002 to 2006, we've seen an increase in crime, both property crime and violent crime, and a significant decrease in the arrest rate. And people have attributed that to a number of factors, labor disputes between police and the city. The consent decree has been brought into it, but very delicately. And then there's some issues that have been raised in regards to the manner and the way that policing has been done in Oakland. So it's interesting, in concert with that, when we look at that subject, maybe it's a combination of people getting more vigorous in their defense and fewer arrests. So there's less coming through the pipeline then.
Yeah. And I don't know that it's necessarily more vigorous in the defense, but cases have gotten more complex in the sense of there's some changes in what's admissible and what's not that requires pretrial hearings and evidentiary hearings before. Part of it, this sounds like I'm a dinosaur, but part of it is the word processing. In the sense it's so much easier now to crank out a lot of paper and motions
Right, right.
than when you had to actually go down and do it and then have somebody type with carbon paper. You were very careful about what you brought.
Oh,
Now,
that's great.
now you've got all this stuff
Right.
on your word
Sure.
processor, this kind of boilerplate,
Cut and paste.
and you can file, you know, all these motions, which really doesn't change the outcome of anything, but does make the process more complex.
Right, they can pay-per use, they say.
Yeah, and then we paper back, but that all takes time and resources,
Right.
and makes the cases, you know,